special ceremonies in which chocolate is being prepared and distributed to people. Okay, so the reason that the late pre-classic is called Katabche Kash and Kashov is because during that time period, for some reason, painting these crosses on vessels, and you can see, you might be able to stand up and see the cross that was painted here. That are here in the process, and then the cross, the arms of the cross come up, and then there is that double and this one is kind of fragile, but you find a cross in the interior of that vessel. So those are that's something that was just a really important element for people to symbol on paint at Kashov. And what is a cross? Well, we know about the importance of crosses in Christian iconography, but the cross is also a thing that you use to indicate a center, and it's kind of a centering motif. And so you see here there's actually special attention paid to the center of this. And it's also a kind of a quadripartitioning of space and time, and so it was a very salient concept among Maya people. And so that's another thing that is this point of convergence, that when Christian missionaries start talking about the cross and the importance of the cross in the 16th century, and Maya people are like, oh yeah, we know all about the cross. Cross is a very important symbol, but their beliefs were different from Christian beliefs, but the two did fuse, and sometimes you'll see crosses even today in the Maya area that are, sometimes the cross arm is just in the middle and it's not up high like it is in the Christian cross, and sometimes the crosses are painted green, and all sorts of foliage and stuff like that is kind of braided through the cross. And this notion of a foliated cross, and the cross as the symbol of fertility, of death as well as rebirth, is it is still a salient concept in the Maya area. So the cross is very, very important. What other elements were important? So I mentioned this is terminal pre-classic. This Society Hall Reb is streaky finish. And so it occurs in levels that are stratigraphically above, where we found these vessels or even these vessels. So then when we move into, and in the pre-classic, not everything is just monochromatic. Some things are two colors or dichrome. But when we move into the classic period, that is when polychromes, so the use of many different colors, especially red and black, polychromes become common in the classic period. So, and in the very early part of the early classic, this is a film that we see with these big four, it's a tetrapod, so it's got 4 legs. What do you think those legs represent?
I have no idea.
Some kind of animal, maybe?
Yeah, some kind of animal. We're on the right track. We've got a lot of them. Yeah, we've got a lot of them in North Carolina, more pigs than people. So this is, and there's a kind of a wild pig in the Maya region called the peccary, right? So we call this the peccary pot. And the peccary is a name for a constellation. I can't remember which one, what we call the constellation. They call it peccary. But you can see here's the snout of the peccary, and then the eyes right here. And you can see also that you can see a number of colors. I mean, this has really been worn, but you can see there's black and red. And then the inside of the vessel has a kind of a glossy orange slip or finish to it. And then you see the two holes in each one of the peccary feet. Those have clay balls inside of them, so that when you pick this pot up, I mean, some of the clay balls are stuck now, but again, that acoustical element. So even just kind of if you're dancing or something with this pot, it would be making a sound. This is just for a brief period of time that you have these four legs, and then most of the classic period legged vessels are just bipodal, they're just three legs, but there are four legs in this total very, very early classic period. And some of them, these are like kind of shaped like peccary heads, but some of them are very big and bulbous, and those are called the mammiform tetrapods. And so it's a kind of a very exuberant style for the Maya area, and then it goes out of fashion pretty quickly, and then things become quite staid again. This is a pot that I find quite interesting, because if you were to look at some of the publications of Maya art historians, like there's a famous one from the 80s called The Blood of Kings, you would see a pot like this, you would see a peccary pot in that publication, but it's a very fancy peccary pot that has a lot of, it's not a polychrome, it's inscribed, and it's got a lid with a paddler and a canoe on it. You know, it's a very fancy pot. And then there's another pot like this from a royal tomb at a site called Calakmul that is north of Tikal, across the border in Campeche, Mexico. And that's also a very fancy pot. So we have these two other vessels we know of that are from royal context from the early classic. But here's a vessel very similar in shape and iconography from Kashob. And so it also tells us that this larger knowledge base was shared, you know, and it wasn't just something that, you know, royals knew about and thought about and made vessels in terms of. Okay, so that's early classic. Here's another very eroded polychrome, kind of like a single serving dish or bowl. You know, this one too, like this is a big serving bowl for lots of people, but these are more like individual servings of pozole or some kind of food. The big dish form from the early classic that's a polychrome are what are called these basal flange polychromes. And when you come around the table, you can see this really big flange that's about probably 2 centimeters coming out here. And then you can see also there are 2 crosses that were painted around the side of it. And then there's 2 animals that are jaguars, but they look kind of like, I don't know, chihuahuas or something. But they have jaguar markings on them, and they have the cat ears. And so if you look closely here, you can make out the jaguar. And this has the cross iconography too, but it's a different kind of cross, a con cross with a very pronounced center. So this is another interesting vessel iconographically. And then this vessel, I just brought this out to show it to you. As I mentioned, this is a replica coming out of a workshop that produces replicas. They don't try to say they're producing originals, but the size of this, it's this cylinder with what you'll learn when you start doing hieroglyphs next week. This is what's called the primary standard sequence, and it's generally a statement of whose vessel this is, and often it says, you know, this is a vessel for cacao. It gives you the date for drinking chocolate, and it gives you the date when it was made. And then there's some sort of a scene, perhaps a palace scene or something, that's painted on it, and it's very common to see someone, you know, sitting cross-legged. He's on a big jaguar pillow that he's sitting. So these are, and we'll look at some images of these. Unfortunately, with these fossils, there's a huge number of them were looted in the especially towards the end of the 20th century, and so we have a lot of those circulating that are, we've lost the pavilions. They come from some kind of royalty somewhere, but the context has been looted.
So do you know what year that was made, the replica?
The replica, that was made in the mid-'80s.
Okay, so they didn't like crack it on purpose, right, to make it look like?
No, you know, that happened, I
Just
think,
over.
probably one of my many moves.
Okay.
One of my residential
Yeah.
moves, I think I didn't pack that quite well
Oh,
enough,
okay.
and it was cracked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is actually, that's a interesting deity that often is called a merchant deity with the black face, and you can see it's holding this looking thing, which would have been made of stone, flint-knapped with that hole in the center so you could hold it. So that would be very hard to flint-knap. Any questions about the pottery? Did you get mosquito bites from you?
Yeah, actually spider bites. I have a spider infested. That's all
In
over
a
my
dorm?
legs. Yeah. Coming again.
Again? Oh, you're the one who had the exterminator coming.
Yeah.
They're biting you while you're sleeping?
Yes.
That's actually terrifying.
You just gotta go to sleep really fast.
That's horrible. I mean, it looks to me like you were like,
Yeah.
a bunch of mosquito
I
bites.
started like fix them today. So.
Yeah, really keep an eye on them because that's not, you know, it looks like they're getting infected.
Yeah.
So. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's horrible. They should move you immediately to another room. How can you
Where do you
sleep
live?
in there?
Okay.
Not more. Bigger and more? Same as you.
Wait, what floor are you on? My friend's on third, and she put her chair down. Her floor